Today's tempted class, today's shir is sponsored by Annie and Paul Foreman. It is to commemorate the yahrzeit of Annie's father, Berish Fasten Dov, Ben Reb Shaul, Zichrono Livrocha, the Neshama should have an aliyah, and we do thank you for sponsorship. And it is also sponsored by Dina and David Brothman. This is to commemorate the yahrzeit of Dina's parents, Melech and Chana Buk. Zichrono Livrocha, the Neshama should have an aliyah. We will study also in the merit of those who are in southern Israel, who are going through a challenging time, and afterwards perhaps we'll say a Tehillim if you remind me for a schos that we should indeed somehow merit to have some calm in southern Israel. In addition, there's a book review that is taking place Wednesday night, which is tomorrow night. You can find information in the bulletin. Also, the older you get, it seems like your kids have more control over you. And my Abigail is involved in some fundraising for High Lifeline, and there's information on the bulletin. So I'm a good dad, and Shalom Yisrael. Okay. Now, in other faiths, which shall remain nameless, when you come into one of those structures of worship, you could be inspired by images, icons, drawings. Those are things that do inspire you. In Judaism, in general, we do believe, and halacha itself does tell us, that when you walk into a shul, there should not be such images because they're going to distract you, right? So instead, what do people do in shul? They talk, right? But the idea behind it is that images do have an impact. I do remember as a child that there was this old Tanakh at home that had some drawings of the wife of Lot turning back and turning into some pillar of salt, and it has an impact. It has a very significant impact when you see that image. So imagery plays a role, and I think you would all agree that when it comes to biblical images, the ladder that appeared in the dream of Yaakov, which is mentioned in the beginning of Parshas Vayetzei, is perhaps one of the most significant, if not the most significant of all images. A ladder and angels, right, ascending and descending the ladder, God Almighty on the top, Jacob sleeping. There's something about this ladder. When we get together here to study Chumash, what are we really doing? What are we really doing? So we share some traditional insights. There are times that, due to the fact that the Torah was given to Torah learners of all generations, we have the right to interpret and read into the text the way we see it and the way it applies to our generation. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through the first few verses of this chaotic parsha. It's a very chaotic parsha, by the way, because you have the story of Jacob running away. It's on page 144. Jacob, Yaakov, running away for a situation that he had no interest in walking into. And he makes his way and he interacts with this fellow Lavan, and he works 7 years for a wife and lands up with the wrong wife, and then has to work another 7 years for the additional wife. And then, as you could imagine, right, for this individual, everyone has some kind of challenges that they have to overcome in their first days of marriage. This guy had to overcome, right, a double portion with 2 wives. And we don't even talk about the fact that, believe it or not, there were actually 4 of them, because each one came in with the quote-unquote the concubine. The complexities and the chaotic existence of this patriarch. And then he declares later on that you should know, for 20 years I did not sleep. right? So some say, okay, that's like dealing with babies, right? The terrible twos, right? From age 2 to 22, right? But he is dealing with a chaotic existence. And you read this parsha and you should have a little bit of mercy on Yaakov, because everything that could go wrong went wrong. And these interactions with this father-in-law, right, were a major pain for this individual. So welcome to the Parsha of Keah, okay? And therefore, the first verses of this Parsha are going to give us a little bit of an understanding and a perspective how to view it in the Jewish way. So let's turn, page 144, okay? Vayetzei Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. So he leaves Beersheva, he's making his way to the north towards Haran. And verse 2, Vayivga b'makom, he encounters the place, not a place, the place. And you are familiar with the oral tradition that this location was the Temple Mount. This Temple Mount, the location where the people of Israel are going to eventually build a temple. A location where he knows very well that his father had a very important experience on that mountaintop. Vayalen sham, and he decides to go ahead and spend the night there. Vaikach me'avnei hamakom, he takes from the stones of the place. The stones of the place, the stones of the Temple Mount. Just think about that, those words, stones of the Temple Mount, and what they signify. Right? When you talk about stones of the Temple Mount, and then vayasem, and he places them, and here's a key word, vayasem mera'ashotav. What is this mera'ashotav? So we find the word rosh, we find the word head. So the question is going to be, what exactly is this mera'ashotav? Two explanations we're going to address, but what you have to know for now is that he sleeps and he has the vision. Sulam mutzav arza, he has the ladder set earthward, and then its top reaches the heaven. And what is taking place is you have these angels of God, olim v'yordim bo, ascending and descending on it. So you have to envision this dream of the ladder, and as we see soon, God Almighty on the top of this ladder, and the angels making their way up and down. You could, if you have difficulty, you could imagine a subway station where you have escalators on both sides, one going up, one going down, and you have the angels making their way up and down. God Almighty communicates with him, and he says, "Listen, I am the God of your father, your grandfather. I promise you this land, and worry not," in verse 15, "I will be with you, and I'm going to guard you wherever you go, and you're going to return here. You are going to return." When he wakes up, he is inspired by it. He recognizes the significance of the location, and in verse 17 on page 146, he says, you know what? This is clearly the gate of the heavens. And in the past, we talked about the fact that we as Jews feel a connection to the spiritual realm. But we understand very well that it's a two-way road. There's traffic going both ways. We cannot walk into our religion with the belief that all we do is just ask God for things and things come from above, but rather we have a responsibility of things going upwards, like our prayers, right? Our actions. And we believe that things come down from heaven as well, like guidance, inspiration, even the law. Because the oral law was established, right, and adjusted many times by the rabbinic personalities who sat there on the Temple Mount in a Beit Din, and that is the law from God that came down through that location as well. So there is traffic that is going up and down, ascending and descending on the Temple Mount. This is perhaps one of the symbolic messages of this dream. And he is inspired, he makes his vow to one day return to this location. He takes the stone in verse 22. In verse 22, he declares that the stone itself will be one day a house of God, and I will tithe everything to God. And then he makes his way to Haran, and the interactions begin. So let's turn back to the word mira'ashotav. Now that we went through this basic review of what the text spells out here what exactly is Mira'ashotav. So two explanations are presented. And this you have to remember, okay? The two explanations to Mira'ashotav. One of them would mean that he placed the stone under his head like a pillow. Not the most comfortable ones, right? Today they advertise all kind of pillows, right? That they're curved and there's a big mark. It used to be a pillow as a pillow, right? It's like everything else you buy today, right? It used to be shampoo with shampoo. Today you stand there for 45 minutes figuring out what kind of hair do I have, right? This is a little bit old. So a pillow, it was a pillow. Me'ra'ashotav. He puts it under his head. Under his head. That's explanation one. Explanation number two, around his head. And the rabbis call it kimarzev. In other words, he angled it. He angled around his head to protect his head. That's what he used those stones for. Okay? Now, the vision itself also needs clarification. What exactly are these angels? So what we're going to try to do is focus on explanation A and B regarding what exactly is Mira'ashotav. What exactly is he doing with these stones? And then we're going to try to find meaning in the dream as it relates to each explanation. Okay, that's what we're going to try to do. Now, you know, midrashim, there are fascinating midrashim regarding what is taking place here. The fact that he establishes a prayer of Ma'ariv, it's the prayer of nighttime. It is a prayer of darkness, when things are not clear, when you have to have faith, right? Like right after Kriyat Shema in the morning, we declare that Emet v'yatziv v'nachon v'kayam, things are clear. In other words, daytime is a time of clarity, we see, we understand, but then there's a time of night when we deal with significant challenges and you have to have faith. So therefore, after the Shema at night, you say, Emet ve'emunah kol zot. It's something that we have emunah, we have faith. It's not clear to us like during the day. So this is one of the midrashim. Then there's another fascinating midrash where we are told that the stone that he uses, right, or the stones he uses to either protect himself or to elevate his head are actually the stones that were used for the altar that his dad Yitzchak was placed upon. And he is somehow re-experiencing, reconnecting to that location. Now we have those experiences that if you go back to your the home of your childhood, right, and you see it, memories come back. I have the great privilege of probably being the person in this room who was born the closest to this location than anyone else, because I was born on Finch. Right? Remember there was a Branson? Yes, and it is a Ness. I'm here, but I was born in Branson a few years ago, and there is an experience that when I'm mindful of it and I drive by it almost every single day, I say to myself, this is quite incredible, right? And then there's a location. There is on the east side of Finch, right? There is a church. There's a church there. Right, not that you need to go see any icons there, but there is a church. But the reason that there's significance for us is because when my younger brother, he was a Vilda 2-year-old, and he ran away once from home, the 2-year-old, and he was found by someone. We were living on a street called Fleetwell, which was south of Finch, and they found him, and they assumed that he's part of this daycare that was in the basement of the church. So they brought this cute-looking kid, which he was, and at the time, and they brought this cute kid into the basement, and he stayed in the church bed because he was probably part of the daycare. And afterwards, we heard that the story was that he ran away and he ran onto Finch, basically, and he basically was a few inches away from the street itself as a 2-year-old. So I drive by that location, and this is a location that becomes significant. Right? You have memories. You go to Israel. I have a long list of locations throughout the world, from Mexico to Israel to Chicago. I could go down the list of locations that you visit. There is something that occurs. So here you have Yaakov. And this is a person who has parents, who has grandparents that are extremely important, significant individuals and recognized individuals. And you could just imagine him growing up, where his grandfather, Avraham, is recognized as Nesi Elokim. He is considered like the Prince of God, right? The messenger of God to that region. Avraham Avinu was extremely well respected, which is impressive. He came there at age 75 to the land of Israel as a nobody, and within a few decades, they declare, it's in the Torah, Nesi Elokim ata betochenu, they turn to him as he is seeking a land to bury Sarah. Everyone recognizes his greatness. His father is well respected, right? And here he is, Yaakov, and probably struggling at some point with his identity. And here he takes a stone that his father, a stone from the highest moment in his father's life, when his father is laying like a korban on an altar. His father peaked then. And if you think about it, Yitzchak, right, and his inability to understand the personality of Esav was most probably the result of him being upon that altar and becoming a very spiritual person, right? You know, there's a midrash that tells us that Yitzchak became blind, midrash says, because when he was on the altar, the angels, what happened with the angels? Cried. The angels cried, and that brought blindness to his eyes. Now, I don't think you take that literally, but it symbolizes this concept that when someone is on a very high spiritual level, right, for him to return to this physical world and have vision and to understand what the challenges of the next generation are, and to understand that his son Esav is not exactly such a big tzaddik, he's detached, right? In other words, you hear stories of people who went to Sunday school here in North America in the late 40s and in the 1950s. And they had these teachers that came from Europe. And these teachers from Europe were not just from a different era and from a different continent, but from a different planet. And they had absolutely no way to understand what on earth are these American kids about. Was meint baseball? In other words, why is everyone talking about Mickey Mantle? Was meint das? In other words, it was so foreign to them. There's a detachment when you come from a different era, a different time, and if you are on a different level, right? Great educators are not the ones that are the most spiritual, but the ones that could really connect and understand what the next generation is dealing with, right? And it is a problem. We had this issue with our youngest, who, as you know by now, controls everything. That she says she wants some kind of electronic device to be able to connect to her friends, the hangouts, one of these electronic narishkat that she needs. And she's drawing a cup, and we know that it's not going to be good for her. So at the end, you buy time. With the older kids, we knew how to say no. Now we don't anymore. So we said, we'll buy time. Okay, what we'll do? We'll speak to one of your older siblings, and we'll ask them for guidance. So I said to her, speak to Aaron. Aaron is an older brother. She says, Aaron's from another generation. He's not going to understand. The 10-year-old is about the 23-year-old. He has no understanding of what's going on. Like, why on earth are you turning to him? What does he know, right? It's a new era. So that is the challenge. So now, Yaakov, he is experiencing here at this mountain, by laying there and putting under his head a stone. I hope everything's okay out there. A stone with the experience of his father in mind. It's obviously a highlight, right? It's obviously a very, very impactful moment. Having the stone from the mizbeach, from the altar that his father experience. Now, you have to realize, if I look at Esav and Yaakov, and I would ask you, each one of them, at a young age, they were looking at their father and grandfather, and a young boy needs a role model. Who was the role model for Esav? Who was the role model for Yaakov? So with Esav, you're going to probably think, well, obviously not someone within his family, because look where he went. Like, look at his lifestyle. the truth is very, very possible that Esav at a young age was quite inspired by his grandfather, Avraham. And why is it? Avraham Avinu was a man of action. Avraham Avinu interacted with people, right? He was obviously a schmoozer. He was obviously able to connect to people, because you can't bring people close if you don't connect to them, and you cannot connect unless you are good with conversation. That's how you interact with people. Avraham Avinu was out there, right? He was interested in hunting, in essence, meaning going out there, identifying someone that needs guidance from above, developing a relationship, doing for him, loving the person, and loving him not just physically but spiritually, and guiding him to what the purpose of existence is. Avraham Avinu was out there in the field. Esav was inspired by him. And by the way, the Midrash tells us that Esav, until the day of the passing of his grandfather, stuck to the traditional path, to the values that he saw at home. And it was on that devastating day when he saw his grandfather dying that he said, you know what, there's nothing in life. In other words, he couldn't deal with it when his role model was gone. That was Esav. Yaakov, what was Yaakov identified as? Ish, Tam, Yoshev, Ohalim, the tent man. Meditating, spending time and thinking about existence, studying values. The man of the tent was more inspired by his father, because Yitzchak did not interact with society. Yitzchak was a person, was limited with his vision, limited with his interaction, respected he was, people came to him. Yaakov identified with Yitzchak, and therefore he wanted to take that calm path. Right? There are different personalities. There are people that love being busy. Right? You have people that love having 14 credit card accounts. And they enjoy being busy. It gives them a satisfaction. And then there are those that say, it is such a schlep to have to deal with so many emails. I don't care if I would have more bonuses and points if I have 14. Today you need cards everywhere. In other words, you go to shoppers, they want the Optima, and you go to this store, you need another card. You have to have a wallet full from air miles, Aeroplan, right? So there are people that enjoy those interactions because it is keeping you busy. And then there are those that say, give me a break. I need things that are calm, right? I want to think about life. I don't need to be distracted by so many things. That's Yitzchak, that's Yaakov. He liked it. Ish, Tam, Yoshev, Ohalim. And all that fell apart. All of that came to an end when his mother knocked on his tent, right? And his mother said, but guess what, Yaakov? I have a job for you. You are now, right, getting dressed up as your brother. And you are going to be stealing blessings that are intended for Esav. His world collapses. And if you remember from last week, the language that he uses, this is a man that is overwhelmed. And everything did go wrong for him because he had to escape. He had to run away. A new environment, right? He had to go ahead and deal. The chaotic existence began with his mother's suggestion. And here, so what we're going to suggest here, this is approach number 1 to understanding the stone, and thus we're going to understand the dream. Approach number 1 to understanding the stone is that he takes a stone and he puts it under his head for comfort. And he was seeking comfort to grab on to that moment of calmness, to reconnect to his dad again, to reconnect to Yitzchak. This was the stone that was used on the altar of his father. When he reached that high spiritual level, when he was his father was a journey of meditation. He wanted to reconnect to it. He knew that he's continuing into his chaotic existence. Sometimes you have people that are very, very busy and overwhelmed. And then they go on a retreat, right? Or you go on a vacation. And then you come back. And the question is, how long does vacation last? Meaning, how long do you feel good after vacation? Zero. Some say 15 minutes. Others say 0. Meaning you come back and you're thrown back into it and nothing, all the calm and everything, poof, is gone, right? Perhaps you benefit more from a retreat that guides you how to deal with chaos than trying to escape from it, perhaps. But this is what Yaakov is doing. He is trying to grab on to that moment of his father, the moment of calm, But God Almighty is going to communicate with him and tell him, you got things a little bit wrong. And that's what the dream is about. The dream is about ups and downs. You know, when we talk about angels, right? So at a young age, we'll turn to a 5-year-old. What's an angel? Obviously wings, right? And obviously flying around. As we mature a little bit, we have some difficulties with that image of our angels. And we start thinking, what are angels? And then we start understanding that angels are messengers of God. That's what angels are. We find that even seasonal occurrences, like wind, is actually called malachav, angels of God. Things that God sends to the world are his angels. We have to recognize them as angels. And here, what Yaakov is being told in his dream is that you should know, welcome to existence. Welcome to your chaotic existence, where you, Yaakov, are trying to escape it and trying to become again or grab onto those good moments. And Yaakov even believes that those good moments are spiritual moments, when you could be calm and meditate and think about God, right? You think that's your purpose of existence? It's not. Existence is malachei Elokim, that you're going to be dealing with all kind of occurrences which are going to have their olim and yordim. Your whole life is ups and downs. All of life is ups and downs. There's good moments, and then there are challenging moments. And you have to recognize that it is all from above, and how you deal with it, that will define you. The spiritual life is not a common life. Now, this sounds like a very simple statement, but you think of a young student, right? A young yeshiva student who is sitting and learning, and then he begins a life and busyness comes, right? Do you know how overwhelming it is when you had an expectation that life will be some kind of calm journey? You need this message that you know what life is about, ups and downs. There are challenges. There are painful moments in existence, right? There are very painful moments. Thank God there are moments of high as well. Accept them, because that is existence. So Yaakov, look at this dream. We are beings that were down with our feet on earth. Our head could reach heaven indeed. Ups and downs, that's what you're going to be dealing with. You know that I mentioned here in the past that there was a game that we used to play as children in Israel called Chavila Higia. Chavila Higia. What's Chavila Higia? So we talked about it here. It's a game about Israeli bureaucracy. That you have to pick up a package. You have to pick up a package in some port, but you have to get documentation, like your grandmother's birth certificate, right? And it sends you the game. It's a game board, and you go to a specific location and you pick up the documentation, and you have to go ahead and show to pick up your package that your pet got his immunized, he got his shots, and you have to bring all kind of ridiculous. And it was created by a fellow by the name of Ephraim Kishon. We talk about Ephraim Kishon. Ephraim Kishon is a brilliant. He had that movie. There was a popular movie about a fellow in Tel Aviv who ran out of Blaumeth, right? Talat Blaumeth, right? The canal, a Meshugana that runs out of a madhouse and starts digging in central Tel Aviv, and someone assumed it must be that the city is about. So the police starts assisting him, and he continues the drilling until it turns Tel Aviv into Venice. In other words, and the idea was that the bureaucracy assumed that, in other words, he loved laughing at the absurdity of the bureaucracy of Israel, but it's really the absurdity of life. Life is a Chavila Higia. If you make a game out of it, right? And, you know, in Israel as well, with all due respect and our love to the country, things are not exactly the way as they should be, right? In other words, a few weeks ago, we get a picture from my brother in Bet Shemesh that they hosted in their house this woman to speak, and she is running for mayor. The name of Aliza Bloch, right, running for mayor. What's the story behind it? So he said that they have a mayor there in town, right, who's comfortable, you know, perhaps not doing the greatest of jobs, but quite secure in his job, because he had the Haredi backing, and the Haredim were the majority of the city. But the city was not dealing with infrastructure. this was a city that they would shut off the water at times because they had to go ahead and supply it to a different area. Things that had to be addressed were not. So there's a grassroots movement, supported, by the way, by hundreds, if not thousands, of Haredim as well, ignoring the quote-unquote leadership that says that you should just be supporting the one that you have supported up until now. And there was a coup. She actually won. She became the mayor in town. Now, obviously, when you are dealing with a chaotic situation in Israel, one way is to just get agitated, right, and just be upset. Or there's an acceptance that, you know what, this is part of the ups and downs. Do the right thing when you are dealing with such a situation. That really defines you. When you have the angels having their ups and downs, that is life, Yaakov, and welcome to your existence. And your next 20 years is going to be all about those ups and downs. You know, he's going to be very, very happy with building a family, but he is going to have some significant issues. So that is explanation number one. We have to go ahead and do explanation number two. Okay, so you see the connection, by the way, of Mirashotav, under his head, connecting to his father, wanting the calm. And boy, do we as beings sometimes really yearn, right, to those moments of calm. But existence and our purpose in existence is to be servants of the Almighty, and a servant accepts his role. And that's what we need to do. Now, what was approach number two to understanding the Vayikach Mira'ashotav? What was approach number two? Protection. He took from the stones of the Temple Mount. When I hear those words, the stones of the Temple Mount, you know what I think about? Avnei HaChurban. I think of the temple being destroyed. There are stones scattered there. There are still stones scattered there, by the way. If you go to some sections of the Kotel, you look down, you'll still see stones from the destruction of 2,000 years ago. That's the image of Avnei HaMakom, and he protects his head with symbolically the stones of the Bet HaMikdash. Comes the Almighty, and the Almighty shows him a dream. Nope. Malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo. What does that mean? So, I entered the rabbinate a few years ago. And it's, as they say, not a good job for a nice Jewish boy. If you've heard that, I'm thinking. You've heard that. And, my prayer, among my many prayers every single day, is that none of my kids should go into. I want them to be Torah scholars. I want them to do for the Jewish community. I want them to have a love of their people, of their land. But I always push them, you need to get yourself some kind of, degree. It's important. And Bar Mirz Hashem, please pray with me that they listen to me, at least regarding this one thing. Now, the real, or perhaps even the greatest of challenges is when you're in a protected society. In other words, imagine I went to a yeshiva where everyone's like me, everyone thinks like me, philosophically, and then I would move to a city where everyone thinks like me as well, and they even dress like me, right? And even, it used to be the different colors of suits, but then everyone even wears the same, they're all men in black. It's like the simplicity, there's a lot of simplicity with it, meaning you're just the same. You don't have to think so much. If the person I'm going to have a conversation with thinks exactly like me, I'm not going to have to start asking myself, so why am I doing it? Because he's doing it and I'm doing it, it's the right thing to do. But then suddenly, right, when you start interacting with someone that thinks a little bit different, has a little bit of a different background, dresses a little bit differently, thinks differently, it's much harder. Because then you're unprotected. Then you have to start asking yourself, why am I doing it? How do I know I'm right? Maybe I'm not. I have to do more research. I have to start thinking, which is very hard to exercise the brain, right? The brain is much happier when it's an autopilot. You start using the head, gewalt, it's not so simple. And my journey has always been, facing such challenges. It started off even when I was in Kola. I was in Kola in Chile. So we were in Santiago de Chile, and there was a small kollel there, which was a fascinating kollel because there were times that we had 10 people there for a minyan. 10 people there for a minyan. Only 10 people for a minyan. And when I would wake up in the morning, by the way, I know that if I want to sleep in because I'm tired, and I don't go to shul and there's no minyan there, the result is going to be that there's going to be 9 people and no minyan in the whole country. So I felt this responsibility for the welfare of Chile, right? And Chile is not such a stable country, from earthquakes to military coups, and you know very well that if you don't wake up, there might be a total destruction there. So this was so I go to shul in Chile, and at times, we were 10 people there, 5 different nuschos, meaning we had there an nusach Ashkenaz, we obviously had a nusach Sfard. There was a Sfardi there, which is Nusach Edot HaMizrach. There was a Lubavitcher fellow who davened Nusach Ari, and we had a Yemenite as well. So it was an inexperience now. The Yemenite fellow was an incredible individual, very charismatic. His name was Shoshan Guri. And Guri, Rabino Guri, right, daven like a Yemenite, pronounced things like a Yemenite. So while I make Kiddush Borei Pri Agafen, he would say Borei Pri Ajafen. Why? Because it was a Yemenite. He was a Yemenite. So one day we're sitting there, and he says to me, you know that if you look at the letter Gimel, there's 2 pronunciations of a Gimel. One, a Gimel that does have the dot in the middle, one without. So I have 2 pronunciations. I have the Ga and the Ja. What about you? So I have to start thinking, wait a second. He's right. How do I deal with this? Right? And when you face someone that is different than you, when you are not in this protected environment where you take the stones of destruction and you try to recreate like a temple around your head to only be with yourself, to be in that protected area, you're going to be challenged after that. I was in Milwaukee we were in Milwaukee after that, and there was a great woman there. Her name is Rabbi Milevsky. Rabbi Milevsky, an incredible, very, very impressive woman. And she would go once a week and give a lecture at the JCC to members of the community, observant, non-observant. It was a popular lecture there in the JCC. And one time she had to leave town, and I assumed that whoever she had as a backup was not available as well. And it could be also the backup for the backup, and maybe even the backup for the backup of the backup. And how do I know? Because she turned to me, and I'm a young fellow at the time, perhaps, a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, and she says, listen, I need you, if possible, if you could give that lecture on Pirkei Avot for me. But she started worrying that I'm going to start saying something wrong. In other words, it's very, very possible, coming from the enclosed environment of a kollel, not being aware or familiar with the way of thinking by others, you could say some real stupid things. And she was, as they say in Yiddish, zittering a little bit, meaning she offered me and she wanted me to do it, but she's like, but please, you'll be careful with what you say. Fine. So I go to this lecture, and we're talking about tradition, and I mentioned the benefit of even cooking the knedels, right, the way the Baba did it. And the woman raises her hand and she says, is that not being too rigid? In other words, to tell me that the recipe has to be exactly the same, and here I am, right? Am I supposed to defend the statement I made about cooking? What do I know about cooking, right? And I have to go ahead and defend the statement. When you interact with the world out there, right, there's a challenge. It is so much easier to not leave Lakewood. It is easy. It is much, much easier. And by the way, it's all of us. It's much easier to only socialize with people that think exactly like me, right? Because if I'm interacting with people who think actually, and they have a different way of thinking, I have to start defending myself, right? It's not easy, but it's not right. It's not right to only stick to your own people. If you have the ability to reach out, if you have the ability to touch people, to educate, if you have the ability to communicate values, you have in essence responsibility. You have indeed a responsibility of reaching out. How do I know that? Because while Yaakov wants to create a wall around his head, right? The marzev, mera'ashotav. He wants to protect himself on the Temple Mount. God turns to him and says, let's read again the dream and vision he has. He has Malachei Elokim Olim V'Yordim Bo. How does that respond, or how does that address the attitude that Yaakov has? So let me share with you a statement from Maimonides, right? From the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. Moreh Nevuchim, Everyone is familiar with Maimonides. Less people are familiar with the fact that he wrote the work, The Guide for the Perplexed. It's a text that is loaded with philosophy, loaded with insights. And here is one of those statements that are extremely important to be aware of how Maimonides philosophically sees the dream, sees the message of this dream. And it's a message for Yaakov, and it's a message for us. And it's a message for those people that feel that they don't want to place themselves in a situation of discomfort. They want to be always comfortable, right? Which is easy. Says Maimonides that you should know, and I'm going to read it in Hebrew and translate. Malachei Elokim, says Maimonides, Hem HaNevi'im. Those are the Nevi'im, not just prophets. The word Navi comes from Niv Sfatayim, movement of the lips. Anyone that communicates values, anyone that teaches you about the purpose of existence and how you live your life, they could be identified as Nevi'im because the lips are used to communicate ideas. So now, Maimonides is telling us that you should know that these angels in the dream are the communicators, the teachers of values, the teachers of Torah. And he notes that it is common for a person to have an aliyah and haga'a el shlav yadua shel sulam. In other words, people grow. You know that when you study text, right, and you meditate, and you pray, and you see insight, you grow. You grow in thought. You grow in understanding the purpose of existence. You grow closer to God. You have an aliyah. So now, I have an aliyah. I spent a few months, a few years studying Torah. I feel I'm a better person. Now what do I do with it? Right? So you're going to say, well, go for another aliyah. There's always room for more improvement. Maimonides says, nope. This dream is telling Yaakov, this dream is telling us that you should know that after you reach a level of aliyah, tavo hayerida, you have to have a descending, you have to make your way down, im hatzav, with a command, that what? Lehanig et anshei haaretz ulelamdam davar zeh. Meaning, when you reach a level, and you become that better person, more educated person, a person that has clarity of what existence is about, you have an understanding of Torah, you went up, next, go down. Go down to interact with others. You have an aliyah, malachei Elokim, those who are communicators of God. Don't protect yourself. Don't think that you go from aliyah to aliyah to aliyah, from growth to growth to growth, more knowledge, more of an education, more of a commitment to God, more of a connection to God. Your connection is achieved by making your way down a yerida to be sure to touch others and reach out to others and not to remain in that protected environment, Yaakov. So now, you were on Temple Mount, right? And what you are going to be facing is a life of interaction. You're going to have a life of interaction. You do your job to reach out and educate others. And by the way, right afterwards, if you remember the story, he meets the shepherds. And he tells them that you shouldn't go ahead and be waiting around. If you are working for others, you have the responsibility of continuing with your job. Meaning he taught values and ethics because he learned the message that your growth is not for yourself, your existence is not for yourself. Every aliyah of malachim, of communicators and educators and teachers, is for the purpose of going back down and saying, how can I help others? This is message number 2 of what is taking place here. 2 very significant messages for Yaakov, and 2 very significant messages for us today. And hopefully, we all have these struggles in life, the struggles of chaotic existence. We have struggles of sometimes intellectual struggles, of dealing with others. Let's be inspired by it, of dealing with our ups and downs, and at the same time remembering our responsibility, and indeed doing our part and learning a message that was given to Yaakov and to us for all generations. Thank you again to our sponsors. And thank you all for coming. I think we'll say some Tehillim. We'll say Kuf Lamed. If you have Sidurim, maybe we'll give you a minute or 2 to grab a Sidur. We'll say a kapitel Tehillim for the welfare of those in southern Eretz Yisrael.